Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Talking Baldocks. We're only laughing because I completely messed up starting this podcast and had to restart it, and now I've completely messed up starting it again. So, what
Well,
are we on this
I
time?
started like because when you started it, it comes up and says this has been recorded, and I said okay, and it hasn't said that this time, so I was confused. But I think it's been recorded, so let's just push on. Hello, I'm Matt Baldock.
And I'm Neil Baldock, and this is the latest episode of Talking Baldocks. And by the sound of it, it could go any way, this podcast. So, what are we talking about today, Matt?
So we're going to talk about choosing your stress, and I think this is probably why we're giggling like children because we're delirious with the stresses of running a company, and it's good for people to know because we ooze positivity, I would suggest. I'm not sure what ooze is the right word because with the resting bitch face, but generally we're fairly chirpy and positive people, but we do have stress, as does every business owner. And it is impossible to run a business without some form of stress. Stress is good. Your body actually needs stress, but there are obviously different types of stress. And so what I kind of want to talk about was the stress you put yourself through in running business really is your choice.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a really good subject to talk around, and it's a really good point because people go through different stages of stress as well. I think when you're running a business, sometimes everything's good, and then all of a sudden it doesn't take a lot. You know, your key member of staff leaves, or um, the government does something which stuffs everything up, and then stress can you could be totally not stressed, and then stress comes out of the blue, and you weren't expecting it, and then you obviously recover from that, and it's all good. But I think you're right. You can almost make your own choice as to whether you what is basically what you allow to happen within your life, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, and I don't. I think if you've got no stress going on, then you're probably not running the business, and you're probably a bit bored, right? So let's. This isn't one of these stress makes diamonds bollocks. It's the human body needs stress. That's a scientific fact, right? That comes back from the cavemen days and things like that, and how we react to it. But interestingly, I met a really interesting chap the other day who came for a chat, and he has done true business ownership. He was sitting there and he was basically saying I don't have to go to the office. I've employed some really good people. They're better than me. They run it. I don't have to do anything. And it's like that's what all the books tell you. And it's bored.
Yeah, yeah,
It does not do. So his stress was actually so where we might, if you're running a business, you might have financial stress. He didn't have that. You might have stress from your team members. He didn't have that. But he had the stress actually of not really knowing what he should be doing now. So and I think that's almost worse. I think, if you're in business, you want that bit of stress. It keeps you on your toes, right? So you want to, and if you're striving, you want stress. So you don't ever want to be. It sounds lovely to be thinking, I'd love to know I've always got the right amount of valuations coming in. I've always got the right amount of money coming in. You want the right amount of money to keep you safe, but I believe if there's no stress, there's going to be complacency, right? If you're not you're thinking, I've got to hit that target, I've got to hit that target, you're going to get complacent. Business is going to go backwards. But as you said, there's different types of stress. And I just wanted to talk about what you choose to be stressed about and what you allow. So we can talk about that with obviously with customers and with team members and that kind of thing. So me and you speak to a lot of other agents, Neil, and a very very common thing we see in varying group chats is, oh, I've got this client. They're a real pain in the ass. They're driving me mad. They're giving me sleepless nights, but they're paying me money. And for us, it's very because a lot of time we think, well, they're paying us money, so it's worth. But it's choose your stress. So you can either have the stress of the pain in the ass client, or you can have the stress of not having that income.
yeah. But also, if people, it's the choosing of the consequence actually, and if you've got a client who's taken up all of your time, they're just causing you headaches, stress, sleepless nights, etc., etc. Actually, rather than worrying about the income you might lose if you parted ways with that client, if you switch the mindset to actually what more income might I bring in if I didn't have to spend my time stressed and having sleepless nights and worried about that particular person, or even not how much extra income can I bring in if you're um, if you're a team member and you're stressed by a client and they're causing you that, and you might think, well, actually, how much more productivity could I have if I didn't have to deal with that person all the time? Um, that's the way to be able to choose the stress, because you then have a conscious choice of, do I put up with this? Do I have a difficult conversation, which means I might actually be able to resolve it? Or do I part ways with the person? If you know what the consequence of doing that is going to be, well, actually, it's going to give me an easier life. It's going to buy me back more time, which I can then invest into these higher paying clients, etc. Just the way people look at it, I think, is the way they've got to switch their mindset on it a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there is that old mantra, isn't it, that hard conversations make an easy life, and easy conversations make a hard life, right? And if we just stick at the minute to clients, then the other thing to remember is that stress is contagious. So actually, if you've got a real, and I'm not, listen, all clients have their own issues and their own problems, so they're gonna, but we will have them, and it's generally the ones that don't want to pay the fee, right? So let's get that out of the way. When you take on that cheap client, they generally come with more problems, and that's we all know that. But you're running a business, you want the income, so you do it. But don't forget that stress won't very rarely stay just with you or just stay with one team member, because your team members all talk. So the phone will ring. They'll see it's Mr. Smith. They'll go, "Oh God, Mr. Smith's on the phone again." They'll start telling the person next to them, and before you know it, the entire office knows what a pain in the ass Mr. Smith is, and they're all getting involved in it. So all of a sudden, you've got, say, four wages all concentrating on the problems that this one person's causing.
Yeah, yeah. And also sometimes the that actually the client might not know that they're causing that stress. And one simple conversation earlier on in the journey might have meant that that stress was alleviated. So just by saying to the client, look, you're sending me 10 emails a day, I can't physically keep up with the number of emails you are sending me. Could you condense that down into one email a day, or can we have one Zoom meeting a week so I can address all your concerns, or whatever the case may be? That's the solution. So that's again making the choice of, how do I deal with this? Do I take the stress, or do I proactively choose to tackle it head on? Which, as we know with most things, if you eat the frog and you tackle things head on and you don't procrastinate, generally things become a lot easier. So yeah, it's just choosing what you're willing to put up with, really.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, the caveat is communication. So bad communication ruins a lot of good things. So set your stall out, set the boundaries with the clients. But ultimately, you decide. So you decide, right, am I going to have the stress of my team being upset? Am I going to have the stress of me worrying at night, being scared to look at my emails? Or am I going to have the stress of being, if let's take lettings, being £100 down a month on my management fee? I would suggest that if it's causing people that much stress and the team stress, if you lost £100, you could put your energy back into something that's probably going to bring you two or three or even £400 back, as you say, because it becomes one person can become all consuming all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
definitely. And it is like that fine line, like you said earlier, because we're not. You do have to have a fine line where you're not having people saying, "Oh, every client is causing me stress," because ultimately, whether you're in sales or lettings, to some extent, we're in the hassle business. We are here,
yeah,
we're here to take people's stress and hassle away from them. So and if we don't do that, then they don't need us. So we have to have that certain level of stress. And as you say, it is actually good. A healthy level of stress is a good thing. But yeah, you got to choose how much of it you're going to allow, and how long you're going to allow that to go on for.
exactly. And then the same comes down to employees, right? And team members. So again, I work with a lot of agents. I've got a couple of agents at the minute that are having real stressful times with their team members. Now, the problem is, we all want to be good people. There aren't many agency owners that don't want to employ people. In an ideal world, we would employ as many people as we could, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And do that. And the world has shifted. Really, I always liken it a bit to the way you would say tenants have probably got more rights than landlords, employees have probably got more rights than employers, right?
yeah,
And
definitely.
mental health is a big issue. I called that in the pandemic. I said actually the biggest problem we're going to have is going to be mental health coming out of it. And I am a full advocate for looking after people's mental welfare. there's obviously only so much you can do as an employer. And let's be completely honest, some employees will take the mick. And there is that old adage, mistaking kindness for weakness. So, if you don't want to be that employer that is, you set them a target and they don't hit it and you don't say anything, well, then they won't hit it the next week and you don't say anything. And then all of a sudden, the accepted norm is that target doesn't have to be hit. So again, it goes back to your point of having early conversations with people and setting standards. Um, and much like it all going around the office, if Dave isn't hitting his target, don't expect Tracy to suddenly think, oh, that's okay. I really want to hit mine because Dave gets away with it. Tracy will start realizing she doesn't have to hit her target. I don't know anyone called Dave or Tracy, so I'm sure you're very good at your job, but apologies for that. But it's what kind of gets accepted gets promoted, really. So if you're having a culture where people aren't doing things, you're by accepting and not saying anything, you're allowing them to carry on. So again, then that's your stress. Do you want to have the stress of having an awkward conversation with somebody, or do you want to have the stress of your business not making any money?
Exactly, yeah. And it goes throughout the whole business, colleague to colleague, business owner to employee. Um, it is that early conversation piece, and even at home, you have it with you might have it with your partner where it's like, I'm not happy with something, but I'm worried about what they're going to say if I tell them, so I'm going to hold it in and keep worrying about it. Whereas sometimes just make the choice and actually go, I'm going to have one tough conversation which could end this stress for me right now, rather than have 3 days of worrying about it,
Exactly.
or whatever the case may be. And with an employee, they haven't, um, they haven't conducted themselves as we'd expect them to with a client, or whatever the case may be. I'm going to tell them that straight away, rather than allow it and it niggles away at me, and then I become more stressed myself, and then I'm sort of a bit more hot-headed towards other people in the business and things like that. It really is. Stress can be taken out by some action, but people have, and also by making the choice to get the clarity over what is causing the stress and then dealing with it.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of stress going on in your life, it's because you are allowing it. There's no doubt about that. It's because whatever is happening in your life, you can do something about it. You just have to make the choice to take some action to do something about it. And to take some action to do something about it, you have to make the choice to get some clarity and find out what is actually causing you stress. So if there's some financial stress in the business, then again, if you just get all stressed about it and let it rumble on, of course you're going to stay stressed. Whereas if you make the choice to go, oh, actually, I'm not going to have that. I'm going to find out why we're not making enough money, and then we'll tackle the root problem of that, and that'll obviously get rid of the stress.
Exactly. And I think you mentioned something about home. I think home is a real indicator of it. So, I mean, I've lost count of the times that I've probably snapped at my kids and then just felt, and kind of then, well, I should say I'm a good dad, but, something that you do, you snap at your kids, then you take a step back, think, God, that reaction probably wasn't warranted. They're a
Mm.
bit of a pain in the ass, but it didn't maybe warrant me. And then you realize, well, actually, what I'm really stressed about is so and so at work, or so and so doing this. If you go through a phase of, every time your phone goes off and it's the group chat for work and you go, oh, you roll your eyes, then and you can feel, yourself getting stressed there, then you've got a problem. And then again, going back to kind of choosing your stress, from when I've been working with other agents and from our own experience over the last 13 odd years, um, the two reasons employers seem to be worried about saying anything to employees is either the scary word of the tribunal. So again, you don't like
Mm.
upsetting customers because you're scared of the ombudsman, and you're scared of the tribunal, or you need them because who's going to do the viewings? But again, it's that choice, right? So realistically, if you have a conversation, you decide someone needs to leave your business, and I am advocating being a good employee. I'm not saying just get rid of somebody because you don't like the color of their hair. But if things aren't going right, you can usually have a frank conversation with them. Because I've found over the years, if you're not happy with somebody, they're generally not happy as well. No one is coming to work thinking I'm doing great, and the employees thinking they're terrible, or no employer thinking I'm a great employer, and the employees are thinking they're terrible. So
That's right.
many, we've had chats like this. And look, you don't seem very happy here. The key indicators of that are you're not turning up on time. you're not hitting your targets, you're not making enough phone calls, and you don't seem to care about those things. And usually people go, well, yeah, no, I'm not really happy. You go, great. Can we resolve it? Yes, perfect. Or no, we can't resolve it. Okay, well, look, do you need some time off to go and job interview elsewhere? What can I do to help you? It's always easier to part that way, right? But if you're going to choose your stress, if it does go down the route and you're going to go to a tribunal, I mean, we've never been to one, touch wood, but you're not going to go to prison. Probably worst case, you're going to get a fine and your insurance will pay that out. So it's the stress of, do I want the stress of every day not knowing if so and so is going to turn up for work or what's going on? Or do I want the stress of, I know I've got to go to a tribunal and get this, and there's got an end date and that's all going to be over. Or the other reason tends to be, oh yeah, but I need them to do the viewings or that. Okay, again, you choose your stress. So do it again. Do I want the stress of every time the phone goes off is an excuse for not coming to work or so and so's moaning about them because they're negative and or do I want the stress of for a month, I'm gonna go and do some viewings.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I
you know,
think you can cut it off sometimes and actually make that decision and say because that ultimately by not if someone is not turning up and just becoming unreliable and everything else, and you're getting stressed then because you think they're going to do the thing you want them to, but then they don't. So then you have to do it anyway. But you're then doubly stressed because you've got to rearrange the diary and do that in quick time. Whereas
yeah,
actually, if you just looked at it and went, right, there's a pattern here. That person is unreliable. So I'm going to do something about that. I'm now going to make a conscious decision that we're going to have to part ways, and I'm going to now do all those viewings for a period of time while I recruit someone more reliable. Then again, you're just taking control of the stress, and you'd rather do that than every day because sometimes, and we can kid ourselves sometimes that but they're here, it's easier to keep them here, but it's not really because, as you say, you've then got to just make these quick time decisions, and also you're definitely right that if you're not happy, they're not happy. People generally like it's a two-way thing. It's
yeah,
not just like it's very, very rare to think one person's like, yes, I love it here, but I'm underperforming, and you know what I mean. Like people,
yeah.
if the employer's not happy, the employee is not happy, and vice versa generally.
It goes
Um,
back to your point about being because people are people, right? I always say business is business, but people are people. And so ultimately, we're dealing with human beings. So if you're in a relationship at home and your missus hates you, and it's very rare that you're sitting there thinking, this is a great relationship, maybe I'll get married tomorrow. You both know that there's something going on. You just actually need to communicate about it and kind of bring it to the
And
table.
actually, normally, what happens when that happens, when it's like a weight's lifted off everyone's shoulder, isn't
Yeah,
it? People go, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I've been thinking this for weeks." And you think, well, why didn't you bloody well say so?
yeah,
But then you didn't say anything for weeks either, so you can't really blame them.
no,
So it's just so much easier. But it's not easy. That's the flip side of it. It's not actually that easy to do because we all sit there and think, oh God, I don't know how this conversation is going to go, but it doesn't really matter how it's going to go because it's going to go one of two ways. It's either
yeah,
going to go really well or it's going to go really bad. And if it's going to go
exactly.
really bad, then you might as well get it to go really bad right now because if it was going to go bad anyway, you might as well. You know what I mean? It's like I,
Yeah, no,
I've
and
said to
also
you before when I used
so
to work. I said to you before. I told a story to the team before, like when I used to work on the door, and you'd think someone was like staring you down, and you were like, "God, this looks like," but I'm not sure if he is staring me down or what's going on. You could stand there and worry about it all night, and then it could either kick off or it doesn't, or you could just go straight up to them and say, "Oh, hi there, excuse me, have we got an issue? Is there anything I can help you with?" And again, he'll either go, "No, absolutely no problem. Sorry, I wasn't actually staring at you. I was looking over your shoulder," or it'll kick off and then it's kicked off anyway. So
yeah.
sometimes it's just, why are we waiting
Well,
and worrying about something that might happen? If it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
yeah, you've made two very good points there. So number one, speed. And again, this is the bit that we do acknowledge is not easy, but if you can get into this habit, your life will be easier. Again, hard habits are easy life. The speed, right? Because let's take the disruptive employee not doing their work, negative around the office. If you cut that quickly, that is a hard conversation to have, and it will leave you short staffed, and you'll probably have to pull a bit of extra work in. The positive of that is the rest of your team will see you will not tolerate that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
It won't have infected them, and they'll actually see, oh, look, our leader's actually going out and getting their hands dirty doing the work, they're leading from the front. Whereas if you take the slightly easier, if you wait and you think, well, they'll probably leave anyway, or it's coming up to Christmas, maybe I'll do it in the new year, all that kind of stuff. Um, what happens is eventually they may leave, but then all the team are demotivated because the team have sat back and watched you allow this person to kind of infiltrate and get the negative there. So then you've actually, the person's left, but you've left with a team and the culture's gone. Um, and so that's the bit. And then the second part you make is it's really the unknowing. So when it comes to control your stress, it's control the controllables, right? And you can only control what you know about. So to your adage, you can go up to the guy and say, is there, you can either worry that there's a problem and you can't do anything about something that isn't happening, or you can go up to him and if you get punched in the face, well, then you know what's happening and you can deal with it
Yeah.
there and then. And it's like, oh, how many of the times have you sat there Sunday night thinking, am I going to get that text on Monday morning saying they're not coming in? Well, then that ruins your Sunday night, and it's nothing that's actually happening. It's you're just worrying about something. So you're choosing to be stressed about something that hasn't happened yet, and then when it does happen, you're stressed about that. So you're choosing stress twice.
Yeah, definitely. And it applies, obviously, we're focusing a lot on like team management here, really, but it applies to every area of the business. It's like if you're sitting there constantly thinking, oh, I don't know, I'm going to make the wages this payday. Well, you can either choose to sit there and sort of shit yourself and think, God, how am I going to make the wages this payday? Or you can do a cash flow report and find out exactly what is happening in the business and see that. And then even if you can't make the wages, at least you know, because now you know you can do something about it and you
Yeah.
can decide, oh, there's a 20 grand gap and I need to go and borrow 20 grand. Or no, actually, it's fine. It's very tight, but we're good, and we'll move on to the next month. And then I've got a load more sales fees coming in, so it's just a cash flow issue. Um, but it is making that choice, and it's a little bit. It's basically not burying your head in the sand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Burying your head in the sand is a huge cause of stress because you just stuck your head in the sand, and you're not. Then you're just still worrying about it, what's going to happen. Whereas sometimes you just got to like find out what's going to happen and deal with it.
Exactly. And the ultimate thing is, it will always be okay. It might be tough for a little while, but actually, it'll always be okay because
It's,
actually, it is like I was having a chat with someone the other day, and I said, "Oh, I don't know, something had gone on." I said, "I work. We haven't had enough listings this month, I don't think." And I said, listing. And he said, "Oh, it's nice to hear you saying something rather than your usual positivity." And I said, "Well, the difference is," I said, I'm an optimist, but my version of optimism is not saying everything is okay, but knowing that it will be,
yeah, yeah.
right? So not just blindly going around going, yeah, everything's great, but it's not. So it's accepting that things aren't right here and now. But I always know that it's going to be okay. So that, Stephen Brown very kindly asked, well, both of us to do his one thing he was saying. My one thing was it will always be okay because
Yeah.
it always has been.
It's quite timely you've said that because our good friend and coach Will Polston has put on his Instagram today a story of the Stoic book he reads, and funny enough, the exact today's message was it's going to be okay, and
Yeah.
it is a Stoic message, and but it is true, and if you believe that, then it will always be
Yeah,
okay.
because you've already been through the toughest time in your life and you're still here. So this is just the next bit, right? So yeah, so I mean we've gone on from choosing your stress to talk about worrying and progress, but fun enough, worry is probably the biggest stress we all have. So
Well, it's the same thing, yeah. But essentially, stress really is worry. I mean,
yes,
it can manifest itself in many different ways, I guess, in anger, in um, well, yeah, it basically is worry, isn't it? It can,
yeah, I mean
people display
I
their
think
stresses in all sorts of different ways.
I read something once. I think it was Will Smith of all people that had said it, but it was talking about the sort of like jumping out of an aeroplane, and it was saying the stressful part of jumping out of an aeroplane is not jump is before you jump out of it.
Yeah,
Up there, how many thousand feet high, shitting yourself, thinking, "Oh my God!" But then once you actually jump and it's happening, well, you're going to go towards the ground anyway. So you're generally enjoying it, or you know it's about to be over. But it's that the before anything happens. So yeah, you're entirely correct. The quickest way to solve worry is to take action.
yeah, definitely. And in fact, I mean, there's so many examples, really, isn't there? But if you think about all the times where you've worried about phoning a client or the team are like, oh God, I don't know what they're going to say. And actually, when you just make that call, again, it's either really bad or actually 9 times out of 10, you put the phone down and you go, God, I don't know what I've been worrying about.
Yeah, yeah,
And you think, well, you've just cost yourself 3 hours of stress. Whereas if you just made the phone call, dealt with it, everything's good for the next 3 hours.
Yeah. Or like when you're not get so I think one of the very first dinners we hosted, a guy called Pim Asson came along. Do you remember
Yeah,
the
yeah,
famous,
Pim's a
really
good
good
guy.
agent in London? And he had a great phrase. It was he expedites matters to their inevitable outcome, which is a lot to say after a few beers. But if you remember recently, we had that I was basically chasing the instruction, and I was getting the gen that always fob off. Oh, we're still thinking, we're still thinking. I was like, what can there still be to think about? So I told you I was just going to drop that one liner in and say, it seems there's something holding you back from instructing me.
Mhm.
I have, either haven't said anything, or I've said the wrong thing. What can I do to take those fears away? And you're like, oh, is that a bit direct? I sent it, and the guy came back instantly. All of a sudden, didn't have to think about it. And I said, oh, well, actually, my business partner's friends with this estate agent, and we want to use them. So that was always going to happen. But there I was for like a week, God, he hasn't replied. What's going on? Have I got it? Have I
Mhm.
not got it? Sometimes just get to the crux of the matter, because what's going to happen is invariably going to happen. And then also you know what you're dealing with it. So when he was telling me he was thinking about it, there wasn't a lot I could do apart from say, okay, well, take your time. But once I knew actually his friend knew another agent, they were going there, then I could look at their marketing, what they were doing, and I could attack it from a different angle. So actually, by bringing things forward, you get more facts. So by attacking things, you get more facts. If you go back to your nightclub story, you went up to the chap, is there a problem? Then you got the facts work, because if he suddenly threw his hand in the air, you got the facts is about to hit you, or he says no, there's no problem. You got the facts it was in your head. So actually, yeah, just get as many facts as possible. I don't think anyone's ever said the word fact so much in a podcast. Get as many facts as possible, and that takes the worry away, right?
100%. Yeah. And yeah, don't think there's much more we can say on that, really.
No, I think we've talked lots
There's
of good
loads
on
of
it.
ways to cut it up, but the simple fact is take some action, alleviate your stress.
Yeah, or sack all your clients, sack all your employees.
Yeah, and,
Yeah, and then if you fancy the stress of not having a business, not having any money, that's yours. But yeah, ultimately choose your stress. But yeah, tackling action beats worry.
100%, 100%. So, yeah, I think hopefully that's helped a few people out there, and if it has, then feel free to send us a message. We'd love to hear kind of how that's helped you, or what stresses you've got, and how you cope with them as well. We'd love people to give a like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, and also loud siren going past there, but. Yeah, we email this out. We email our database with a link to this podcast every week. So if you're not on there and you would like to be notified early, then just message one of us on LinkedIn, and we'll add you to the list.
Good stuff.
Right, we'll see you all next time.
See you later.